All right, welcome 934th Airlift Wing Commanders. This is virtual training, APHIS for you, the Commanders. So we've got some references for you. Air Force Inspection System, purpose of APHIS, or as Colonel Wall likes to say, the why of APHIS. APHIS components, the how, CCIP, RBSS, only because we are currently going through the process of creating the RBSS. It's with the group commanders and wing commanders right now for rating, and I hope for the unit level squadron commanders to be able to use that RBSS. Self-assessments, UAI, and then questions at the end. Here's our references. The 9201 AFRIC SUP just recently came out last November time frame, so if you haven't read it, please read the AFRIC SUP. That should be the only 9201 that you should be opening. You've got the AFPD 90-2, not really for you guys to read, it's the Parent Inspection System pub. But the CCIP handbook. If you have not read the CCIP handbook, I'm not sure that it's mandatory, but you need to read it. It's definitely everything you need to know about CCIP. What is APHIS? Okay, so single coherent integrated synchronized system of inspections. What does that mean? It means the Secretary of the Air Force wants to know where his risk is overall, all the way down into the unit levels in the Air Force. It's going to come down through the Chiefs of Staff all the way down to the unit commander level. So APHIS is for everyone at all levels. So the purpose of APHIS, or as Colonel Wall, I like how he puts it, the why. Why do we do this? Why do we inspect? Pretty much comes down to this middle one here, improve the unit performance. Enable and strengthen, motivate and promote, and identify the issues all lead to good performance. If we're enabling and strengthening our mission, effectiveness, and efficiency by inspecting and making sure that we're cutting out all the chaff out of our programs, we're enabling unit performance. If we're motivating and promoting good military discipline, if we're making sure that we don't have any poor order and discipline in our programs, we're helping unit performance. If we're identifying the issues with the readiness, economy, discipline, etc., making sure that there's any poor training or dilapidated equipment or anything of that is identified and taken care of, or that we can somehow mitigate that risk, then we're going to improve our unit performance. Okay, so Air Force Inspection System goals. All right, stop painting the grass green. I think we've all heard it. AFRIC notices, they look at our tool, DERS, they look at the UMPR, they look at all these tools, right? And then they go and look at your MICT checklist and everything's green, right? When you just said in ART tool that, or DERS, that, your deployment capability is falling apart. So they do notice. Reward this. So as commanders, setting the tone is probably the most important piece to this whole thing, right? If you're barking at everybody who has observations in MICT that they better get their stuff together and get that fixed, and that's all you ever talk about, it's probably not setting the best atmosphere in your unit to be able to have the freedom to embrace the red, and it can be very difficult. APHIS components, three big ones here. Just a 10,000 foot strategic level view. Wing Commander's Inspection Program is everything at the IGI level, the exercises, the bylaws, the horizontal inspections, the vertical inspections that we're doing, and then it goes all the way down into the self-assessment programs at the unit level. Your MICT, your stand eval programs, your QA programs, what your first sergeant is out there doing, what your shop chiefs and your superintendents are out there doing. That is all part of your self-assessment program. That's part of CCIP at the unit level. Your MAGCOM functionals, they're up there making the policy decisions, funding, funneling funding into programs or out of programs, and they're in contact with your unit level POCs for a lot of these programs. They're that feedback back and forth is super important so that they can manage those programs at a functional level based off of all the way down to the unit level inputs. The IGI is going to help facilitate that whole process. We're gonna manage our inspection programs, the 24 to 36 month UEI cycle, that continuous evaluation that culminates in the UEI capstone event. And there's your 3 APHIS components. The Air Force Inspection System, here's a little bit more on it. Just so everybody is kind of aware, the inspection system goes all the way up and down the chain, right? It goes all the way up to Secretary of the Air Force. Your AFIA, your Air Force Inspection Agency, is kind of that Air Force headquarters level oversight authority for all of our inspections and exercises, and it goes down through the MAGCOM IGI levels. At every level, everyone's getting that UEI capstone event. They're being inspected. So we're not alone. It goes all the way up and down. And of course, there we are at the bottom, Commander's Inspection Program and the individual reporting all the way down to your airmen at the lowest level. Commander's Inspection Program, I'm not going to say a whole lot. It's, as we said, the risk-based sampling strategy, as I was talking about, is a major component of the Commander's Inspection Program. Now, this is required at the wing level. The IGI office is going to help create this product. It's the wing commander's intent for what he wants us as the IGI to go inspect. It's his priority list, if you will, or priority of inspections for us to go inspect. Remember, this can be a very useful tool all the way down to the squadron level. The RBSS can be done at the squadron level based off of unit level programs, unit level risk, and unit level priorities. So please, if you're a squadron commander listening to this, pay attention and think about how can I use this to shape my self-assessment program. Next slide. Desired learning objectives: understand the RBSS, the final decision authority, role of the 9201, and how do we build the thing. So for references on the RBSS, we have the AFI 90-201, AFRIC SUP, of course, the only 9201 you should be looking at, and the CCIP handbook. Both of these products have the RBSS explained, or at least talk about it. The CCIP handbook actually goes more into explanation of how to create your CCIP. If you haven't read the CCIP handbook and you're a commander, you're wrong. Go read the CCIP handbook. Overview: risk management review, waivers, RBSS, all the 9201 attachments that are going to go into this process, and then how do we RBSS inspect, and then the planning process. So we look at risk assessment. We've got this risk assessment matrix. 2 factors go into risk assessment: severity of the effects if the program fails, and then the probability of that happening. So if we have something that's happening frequently, like flying operations, we're flying every day, twice a day. If that fails, if we crash an airplane, for example, that's catastrophic. So flying operations would be something that would be a 4, right? Because it'd be catastrophic, and it's something that could happen any day. So we have to assess that as a high risk. In the low category, in the 1s, we've got moderate or negligible, and maybe seldom or unlikely. So low frequency of something like painting roads. How often do we paint the roads? Maybe once a year, maybe once every other year. What if we don't do that program? What if we stop painting the roads? Is there likelihood of emission failure because we don't do that? No, probably not. So that would be an example of a 1. If we're spending a lot of time inspecting low priority, low severity items and not focusing on those 4s, we're probably wasting our time. So that's how you look at this risk assessment matrix. So your tier waiver levels, here they are, tier 0, 1, 2, 3. Most people realize this. These are in the APHIS this way. Your tier 0s are your non-Air Force Authority, your congressional, presidential level stuff. Almost impossible to waive these items. They're required. There's a high risk involved with any of the tier 0 level items failing in the unit. So if you're looking at your programs and you have a lot of tier 0s, 1s, or even 2s, those are higher risk programs if they fail. Your tier 3s, waiverable at the wing level. We encourage if you're having difficulty managing your tier 3 items, and there's a possibility that you can manage the risk without doing those tier 3 items, that we seek a waiver for that stuff and up to the wing commander so we can take that risk and identify it to the wing commander. So for risk assessment, just a couple categories here. Static risk is stated by policy. So what that means is higher headquarters has already deemed these things as carrying a level of risk in which they feel needs to be looked at annually. So the attachment 2.1 is your exercises and bylaws. Your attachment 2.2 is all those items that that outside agencies come to look at on an annual basis. Attachment 7 is your readiness exercise. And then, of course, like we just talked about, the tiered level stuff in the APHIS. Your dynamic risk is more fluid. It's things that the wing commander recognizes as being risky. It's something that the MAJCOMs might recognize through several UEIs or looking across programs that they feel have become more of a risk item, so they'll add it to the SII. And then your assessment as a commander. What do you see as your highest risk items in your units? Next slide. So now that we've talked about risk, we've got the risk-based sampling strategy. This is going to be basically a methodology, kind of a philosophy of how we're going to identify and inspect all of the items that are both static and dynamic risk items throughout not only the UEI cycle, but we're going to break it down into like the annual or the fiscal year cycle. So we've got those SIs and bylaws that we have to do, and then we've got the lower level stuff that the squadron commanders and the wing commander want to look at. This should be a written plan, and then we're going to go through the whole process of how we make this happen. Next slide. So we start with the attachment 2, table 2.1. So this is static level stuff. The bylaw programs, I think everybody kind of recognizes those: suicide prevention, equal opportunity. Those are going to be in the inspection operation directive as required items to inspect. The table 2.1 also has the exercises. Again, we have to do those exercises. They're required, mandated by the 9201. The table 2.2, like I was saying, that's OSHA, EPA, outside agencies, DOD, that are going to come in and do inspections on individual units or in individual programs at the unit level. Some are wing level stuff. So we have to do those things. This is where the gatekeeper comes into play. So that gatekeeper, if they want to come visit us, they're going to have to go through that process of getting vetted through that program, making sure that they're not stepping on any other things that we have going on at the wing at the time. Doesn't mean we can stop them from coming, but it does kind of let us dictate when they can come inspect us. Next slide. The table 3.1, this is something that's a very useful tool for the squadron units, the SAPMs, when you're putting together your self-assessment program. This is kind of a list of all the programs across, pretty much across all functional areas that the UEI team, when they come, have to select from when they're inspecting their items. So they're kind of the deemed important programs. So if you look at this attachment 3, it'll help you to kind of help assess your risk for your self-assessment programs. How do we build RBSS? 7 steps. Determine intent, prioritize, get approval, allocate the PIL, which we'll talk about, and then the last 5 are pretty much just the IGI doing the inspection. The first 4 are the lion's share of the work. Next slide. So step 1 is the commander's intent. So it's important that you obtain the full understanding of your commander's intent, what they want looked at in the organizations, what they think are priorities and important to the unit. With Colonel Lay, listening to him in the staff meeting and having interviews with him, we knew that unit training managers and unit deployment managers were 2 big things that he was concerned about. So those are obviously going to be things that are going to go on our priority inspection list, and eventually we'll inspect. But there's also a lot of other things. You just have to be able to discern that, sit down, get those things out of them. Get it out of the commander. If you're a commander, try to communicate those things. If your SAPM is trying to put together an RBSS, put some thought into this process. Put some thought into the concerns that you have, so that you can get these in a formal document, so that everybody's on the same page with where you want the inspection team to be looking. So the second part to the step 1 is the output. Now that we have the commander's intent, we've looked at our static and dynamic requirements. This is all going to go in a formal document. This is all part of the strategic planning of the APHIS system. This document drives down all the way through the wing to the unit levels what the priorities of the wing commander are for his inspections. So it's a pretty important document in that respect. It spells out the next 12 months of inspections. If you're creating your own, it doesn't have to be quite so robust. Ours is 3 pages. It's a little bit more detailed. At the unit level, if you're creating something like this, it might only be 1 page, and you might only have a few items on it, because a lot of the mandatory things are already being spelled out in this wing level inspection operations directive. Yours might just be a memorandum for record. So step 2, ID and prioritize the risk areas. We already know we've got the high risk mandatory inspection items. The 9201, attachment 237, and then your inspections and exercises. But what about the other items? What about all the items that come down to what do we have time to inspect? We're going to identify them based off of iGEMs, MICT, all your ABC programs that are out there, your horizontal programs that are out there. Maybe there's some programs that have fallen off of MICT that we no longer track. Those may have become higher risk programs now because lack of MICT and lack of a tool to track those. So what do we do with that list of stuff? We'll look at that the next slide. So like I said, we have our priority inspection list based off of the stuff that we found that maybe is no longer in MICT, maybe they're iGEMs items, etc., etc. We put them into a list. Then we go ahead and give them a risk priority or risk level based off our perceived risk of that program. I've done this by, we've created a list. It's about 95 items. It has a lot of MICT items that are horizontal programs like the ABCs. It also has, I've identified some checklist items that are no longer in MICT. They used to be programs, but now they're still programs, but they're not in MICT anymore. And then we give those things a risk level. I've given that out to the group commanders, the wing, vice wing, and CCO and the IGI office. And we're going to put those risk assessments on each of those programs, and then at the end of that I'm going to compile all the numbers, and that will give the wing commander a list of the programs, horizontal programs across his wing, and how they're perceived as far as risk goes. So they can then kind of make an educated selection on where he thinks he should give a little bit more attention via the IGI office. We might go out and do horizontal inspections on his #1 priority program that he feels is a high risk item. And that is per this inspection priority inspection list. So step 3, CIMB approval. Because we are getting a late start on this process with the new wing commander, we're going to skip this step. In future years, I do hope to try to do the CIMB approval stuff and have more buy-in from the squadron and group commanders. I am getting buy-in from the group commanders via the priority inspection list. So look for this in future years to be part of this process. So step 4, allocate the PIL items into the wing schedule. So obviously you have your big rock items, stuff that's going to happen, your deployments, your big exercises. Then you're going to start adding your PIL items into there as you have time and resources throughout the year to be able to inspect some of these priorities of the wing commanders based off of this list. And there you go. Now you have your inspection plan. So now what's the rest of the cycle? What's next? We've got our commander's intent, our inspection operation directive, whether that's just a memorandum for record at the unit level. We've got our priority inspection list, just the list of your things that you're going to be looking at as a priority, and you've got your calendar of inspections for the year. So what's next? Plan it out, execute the inspections, and get your results back. This is going to be done at the unit level the same as we do it at the IGI level, using your SAPMs and your WITs to go execute your self-assessment program, all based on this RBSS process. Questions are next. So I know the RBSS is kind of a big philosophical program, right? It's kind of a big idea. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. And it seems very cumbersome to begin with, but IGI is there to help you put your own squadron level RBSS together, which I think is very important. You all have your own unit level programs that we're not looking at. The IGI is at a strategic level looking at horizontal wing level programs, and we're not always paying attention to the smaller unit level programs and understanding where that risk is at those lower level programs. That is where you have your finger on the pulse. So if you need help putting your own risk-based sampling strategy together, developing that inspection operation directive for your own unit, your own priority inspection list that you can choose from and have that part of your self-assessment program, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help you get that going. All right, so we're going to continue back into the CCI program on the next slide. So back to the Commander's Inspection Program. This is the cornerstone of APHIS. It's driven by the RBSS, as we just discussed. We can't really implement the CCIP until we have the plan for it. We can now implement the calendar, go out. We have the plan from the wing commander, which that RBSS drives all the way down through the unit levels. That RBSS should be used at every level all along the way to put my self-assessment program up against the wing commander's inspection operations directive. Am I meeting the intent of what the commander wants my program to look like? This whole program, top to bottom, is validating the most important part of the UEI, and that is the communication, that strategic level, top to bottom, that OODA loop, that feedback loop up to the wing commander. This CCIP must do that, and that's going to be what the UEI is there to look for. And it gives commanders at all levels the right information at the right time. If you know your programs, if you have a robust inspection program, you're going to know what's going on, and you're not going to stumble when you go to rely on a program that isn't giving you what you need. So CCs need to develop the effective inspection program. It needs to rely on that risk-based handling strategy, and then drive those inspections based off of that. You've got your horizontal and your vertical inspections. Of course, your horizontal inspections are far-reaching across the whole wing. Every unit, programs such as unit training managers, unit deployment managers, and then you have your vertical inspections, things that are much more individual to the units. LRS vehicle maintenance, security forces, perimeter security. You know, those programs are vertical. They only belong to those units, and they need to be inspected. The unit self-assessment program is going to be a big part of that. At the IGI level, we're going to be looking at a lot of horizontal programs. We're not always going to have our finger on the pulse of the vertical programs, the unit level programs. So that's going to have to be up to the unit self-assessment programs. Something else we need to look at, the real world events, like we're doing right now. The COVID. What can we gain? What have we gained from experience? What have we noticed that we're lacking in? We need to capture that stuff. We need to capture those lessons learned and be able to recognize the limitations and the weaknesses and the risk that we're taking. Other things to look at are your SAVs, external inspections from those teams, like we talked about before, that are coming in. Did they find something that we didn't? We need to learn from those external inspections and get that under control. The CCIP, overarching, managed by the IGI. We're driving the RBSS and that main plan down to the unit levels. We're doing the horizontal inspections, but we're mostly we're only a few people in the shop. We rely on those SAPMs and those WITs to execute and plan. They're the SMEs out there. They're the people that know what's going on out in the wing. So we rely very, very heavily on those to cooperate in that plan and execution of this the CCIP program. The group and squadron commanders partnering with the wing commander needs to happen. That's, like I was talking about with the UEI, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that top to bottom communication loop that's going on in our wing. The squadron commanders are supporting a strong unit self-assessment program that's feeding the CIMB. It's not leaving anything out. It's including those QA programs. It's including those stand eval programs. It's including supervisory level observations. It's using the WIT to do vertical inspections on their own programs. It's submitting waivers. Do we have a waiver process going on? Only the wing commander can accept risk. If a squadron level commander says it's okay not to do a program, and that is creating some kind of mission failure somewhere, it's ultimately the wing commander who takes responsibility for that when anything bad happens. So only he can accept that risk through the waiver process. So that brings us to the unit self-assessment program, the SAP, or some call it USAP. What's your role as unit commander? You're the one that should know your program. You're the one with your finger on the pulse of what's going on in your unit. Nobody else is going to be out there doing that for you. The IGI's role is to be at the strategic level, at the wing level, at the horizontal level, to be looking at that. Yes, we're going to be coming to do a vertical inspection, but that's going to be few and far between. It's going to be that that solid self-assessment program that's going to keep those unit level programs running strong. The key to this is a full-time SAPM. I know I say it, I've said it again and again. I know that some units struggle to have the manpower to be able to do this, but it's one of the most important, if not the most important program you've got going on in your unit. Your ability to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in your unit requires pretty constant supervision. So that SAPM is going to be pretty important. Identify your problem areas and have a plan to fix it. Not going to belabor this. We're embracing the red, right? It's easy to say, yep, embracing the red, but that doesn't mean that you can say, yep, I know I have a problem, and then just leave it. You have to have something. You have to have a plan to mitigate that risk. How are we going to fix that? How are we going to get around not having that asset or that capability? So something that just needs to be reviewed and updated frequently. Keeping the wing commander up to date on the programs and the risk that's going on out there in your unit. Honestly reporting deficiencies. We're going to have the quarterly CIMB. There again, your SAPM is going to be a key piece to that CIMB. IGI is going to be requiring that the SAPMs drive your MICT and the IGEM's data up through your group commanders and to the wing commander. The IGI's role is not to drive metrics. That's going to come from the units. The CIMB is going to be that feedback loop from the unit commanders up to the wing CC. MICT is a tool for virtually showing the FAMs because they're not always here. But they are looking. You know, they're doing that 6-month, that 18-month look. They're all the way through the UEI cycle. They're keeping in touch with your unit POCs. The only way, the only tool they have to do that is through that MICT. So it's very important that we keep the programs that the FAMs are watching via that the CIMT, which lists all your baseline checklist and your other functional checklist that you should be running in MICT. If you have any questions on that, we can go over that, and that's something that your SAPM should be intimately familiar with. If your deficiencies are known, have a plan to fix it, like I've already said. I think this is the last slide. Unit level responsibilities, just some last things. What's going to make you successful? Planning ahead, training, and exercising. Qualifying your airmen and civilians, training them, equipping them, and preparing them to do their jobs and to successfully do the mission, right? And be ready to deploy, deployment ready. Self-evaluate the unit. Don't rely on the IGI to do this for you. We have limited resources. We're going to be looking at mostly, horizontal level programs, and it's going to be up to you to keep your finger on the pulse of those unit level programs. So carry on. I know this was a lot of information. Thanks for listening. I hope it wasn't too boring. If you have any questions, again, IGI is here to help, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.